The phone rang for what felt like the 100th time when Ethan finally stirred. He reached a hand out from under the duvet, fumbling for his phone. "There's a problem with the client presentation," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "Need to go back to the office." I put down my chopsticks, the half-eaten bowl of noodles suddenly unappetizing. "You said the exact same thing last year on our anniversary." "I'm sorry, Lily," he said, his voice already sounding distant, preoccupied. Next year, I'll definitely make it up to you, I promise." I just looked at him, a sad smile playing on my lips. I felt a strange kind of pity for him. He wouldn't have a chance to make it up to me next year. He just didn't know it yet. Ethan's been incredibly busy lately. So busy that he hasn't even had time to reply to my texts all day. Which is why he doesn't know yet that I have lymphoma. Advanced stage. We dated for 3 years in college, married right after graduation. Classic everyone doubted us story. Even my parents were skeptical. But Ethan, bless his heart, actually knelt down with me in front of them, begging for their blessing. He promised them he'd make me happy, give me a good life. They gave him 5 years to prove himself. Ethan only needed 3. The startup he co-founded with his friends, a tech company called Innovate, took off. We went from struggling students to, well, not rich, but comfortable. We moved into a nice apartment in the West Village. My parents, seeing his success, softened considerably. I thought I'd married the perfect man, the golden boy. So, naturally, I became a full-time housewife, focusing on getting pregnant. My world revolved around making Ethan's life easier. The day the cracks started to show up, that was the day I realized something was seriously wrong. Ethan came home completely wasted, collapsed onto the bed, out cold. He slept like the dead, but his phone kept buzzing, lighting up with notifications. I picked it up, intending to silence it, and saw a message still displayed on the lock screen. It stood out, stark and clear. "Thank you for celebrating my birthday with me. I'm so incredibly happy." Before I could even process that, another message popped up. "If I told you I regretted everything, would you come back to me?" I looked at the name saved in his contacts. Chloe S. Chloe, suddenly I remembered. Freshman year, Ethan was the it guy, gorgeous, athletic, brilliant, top of his class. I used to wonder, with a kind of detached curiosity, how a person could be that perfect. So I started observing him. Not in a creepy way, I swear, just showing up where I knew he'd be. Basketball games, the library, the student union. It was innocent. Eventually, he noticed me. One day, he cornered me outside the library, looked me up and down with this little smirk, and said, completely deadpan, "Hey, do you have a stalking hobby?" That's when I realized that beneath the polished exterior, the golden boy image, he had this unexpected, playful side, a hint of something mischievous. From then on, I was more open about my admiration. I brought him water at basketball practice. I gave up sleeping in and joined him on his morning runs, bundled up in a ridiculous, oversized coat. I even found ways to sneak into the audience when he had debate competitions. Then, he blocked my path outside the library again. This time, he was serious. He asked me point blank if I wanted to be his girlfriend. My friends acted like I'd won the lottery. Everyone was whispering, waiting for me to mess it up, for him to dump me. Life, though, it throws you curveballs. No one expected Ethan and me to walk down the aisle. If I hadn't received that friend request on his birthday, I might have gone on believing in our perfect little world. I might never have known that the day Ethan asked me to be his girlfriend, his supposedly unforgettable first love, was getting engaged to someone else, halfway across the world. Ethan showed up the next morning looking sheepish. He saw me sitting on the sofa wrapped in a blanket, and his expression shifted. He hurried over. "Why are you up so early, Lily?" He sounded concerned, but there was a strained quality to his voice. It wasn't that I'd gotten up early. I hadn't slept at all. I'd been sitting there, staring out the window all night. "Are you finished with work?" I asked, my voice flat. A flicker of something, guilt, crossed his face. "Yeah, finished, sorry. It won't happen again." He tried to hug me, but I subtly shifted, avoiding his touch. I stood up. You must be starving. I'll make you some breakfast. He hesitated, then followed me into the kitchen. I can help. Ethan's stomach was delicate. During those early startup days, he was constantly at networking events, forced to drink on an empty stomach. It wrecked his digestive system. The worst episode was when he ended up in the ER with a bleeding ulcer. I couldn't stand seeing him neglect his health. I nagged him constantly, telling him he didn't need to push himself so hard. He'd always promise he was just trying to secure deals to build a better future for us, and he did. This apartment in this prime location, it was bought with the fruits of his self-destruction. That's why I poured so much energy into decorating it, making it a haven. After breakfast, scrambled eggs with chives, his favorite, he left again, promising he'd be home for dinner. My best friend Maya called. The first thing out of her mouth was, "Is Ethan home?" "He just left. Why?" I asked, already bracing myself. Maya hesitated. "Lily, have you heard anything about Chloe lately?" I answered casually. "What about her?" Maya, clearly exasperated, said, "Of course Ethan wouldn't tell you. Chloe got divorced. She's back in the city, and she's working at Innovate. I saw them having dinner together the other night, laughing and talking. It was disgusting." I tightened my grip on the phone, my knuckles turning white. They're old friends. It's normal to catch up. Maya practically shouted, "Everyone knew back in college that Chloe dumped Ethan. Are you really that blind, that trusting?" Of course I wasn't. The truth was, I still didn't know if Ethan had ever truly loved me. Back then, after my pathetic, relentless pursuit, I finally figured out that his constant presence on the basketball court was his way of coping with heartbreak, trying to forget the girl who'd rejected him. And that's when I conveniently appeared. I was the rebound, the distraction. I barely registered the rest of Maya's rant. By evening, Ethan texted. The project wasn't finished. He wouldn't be home for dinner. I sat at the table, staring at the 3 dishes and soup I'd prepared, all his favorites. When we first graduated, I was a terrible cook. I'd even managed to burn scrambled eggs. After a few meals of barely edible food, Ethan had sighed and said he needed to work even harder so we could afford a housekeeper, so I wouldn't have to struggle in the kitchen. I refused. Back then, our combined salaries barely covered rent and utilities. Every penny counted. The money we spent on dates was carefully saved from his part-time job. Later, he realized that wasn't sustainable, so he started Innovate with his friends. Starting a company required a lot of capital. Our lives became even tighter. Ethan started working overtime, attending endless social events, even using his weekends to meet potential investors. One day, he came home early and was utterly shocked to find a table laden with delicious, home-cooked food. He stood there, stunned, for a long time, before silently devouring 3 bowls of rice. I sat there for hours, the food growing cold. My legs went numb. Finally, a text message arrived. From Ethan. "Sorry, Lily. It'll be another 2 hours. Go to bed. Don't wait up." The 3 dishes and soup were untouched. I stood up, carried the plates to the sink, and scraped the food into the trash. I took a bath, and maybe I was just too tired, because I ended up falling asleep in the tub. I dreamed of college Ethan, confident, charismatic, surrounded by adoring fans. Yet he'd chosen me, the awkward girl who'd practically stalked him. When we first got married, I felt like I was living in a dream. I'd cling to him, listening to him patiently reassure me over and over that it wasn't a dream. I told him, "Ethan, if this is a dream, I never want to wake up." He'd smiled indulgently and said, "It's not a dream, Lily, and it never will be. We'll be together forever." But now, that dream was shattered by him, and I was still trapped inside, struggling to breathe. I woke up shivering. I was still in the tub, and the water was freezing. I've never been particularly healthy, so I quickly dried off, wrapped myself in a towel, and crawled under the covers. It was late autumn, not bitterly cold, but for someone like me, who always had cold hands and feet, it took forever to warm up. In the past, Ethan would warm the bed for me, but he wasn't here tonight. After lying there for 2 hours, still shivering, I gave up on sleep. Scenes of Ethan being kind to me, all those little gestures of affection, replayed in my mind. I had this sudden, overwhelming urge to call him. All these years, whenever he said he was at a business dinner, I trusted him implicitly. I never called, never texted to check up on him, but tonight the urge was unbearable. Before I could stop myself, I dialed his number. It rang and rang and rang. No one answered. Finally, it went to voicemail. I sent him a text. How much longer will you be? The message, like a stone dropped into a deep well, disappeared without a trace. In the dead of night, I got up, boiled some water, and soaked my feet, finally managing to get warm. But sleep was impossible. Sitting on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, I suddenly remembered Chloe's WeChat. I opened her Moments, and there it was. A photo of dishes from a Chinese restaurant. And the caption, "After all these years, only you still remember my favorites. Thank you for keeping me company while I worked overtime and for taking me to eat the Chinese food I've been craving." My stomach lurched. I felt a wave of nausea. I ran to the bathroom, but nothing came up. The doctor had told me that if I didn't start chemotherapy soon, I might not have more than 3 months left. He urged me to start treatment immediately. I made up some excuse, delaying it. The doctor listed all the potential consequences, but all I could think was, chemotherapy wouldn't cure me. After leaving the hospital that day, I had bought a chestnut cake and gone to Ethan's office. Ethan's assistant, Sarah, looked surprised to see me, a little flustered. "Lily, what brings you here?" I smiled. "I was just passing by, so I thought I'd drop in." Sarah glanced at the cake box in my hand. "Oh, you brought Ethan's favorite. I'll call him for you." "No need," I said, already walking towards his office. "I'll go myself." Sarah seemed like she wanted to stop me, but it was too late. I pushed open the door, and there they were, Ethan and Chloe, sitting side by side at his desk. On Ethan's face was a smile I'd never seen directed at me. A smile of genuine, unadulterated happiness. Chloe was still as beautiful as I remembered. They were talking, and Chloe was laughing, this bright, carefree laugh. I didn't want to interrupt them, I really didn't. But my legs were so sore I just needed to sit down. I walked over to the sofa and sat. My presence must have broken the spell because they both turned to look at me. I clearly saw a flash of panic in Ethan's eyes. He stood up abruptly and strode over to me. "Lily, why are you here? Why didn't you call?" I handed him the cake box. "I happened to be nearby, so I thought I'd stop by. Here, the line wasn't long today." Ethan loved chestnut cake. I'd known this since college, and he only ate it from this one particular bakery. He hesitated for a few seconds before taking the box. "Next time, don't buy it, just get something you like." He casually placed the box on the desk, took my hand, and started to lead me out of the office. "You haven't eaten yet, have you? Let's go get something." We'd only taken a few steps when Chloe's voice came from behind us. "Ethan, Mr. Hayes, I like chestnut cake too. If you're going out, can I have this?" I could feel Ethan stiffen beside me. He turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. Before he could say anything, I smiled and said, "So Ms. Zhang likes chestnut cake too?" Chloe replied, "Yes, this bakery's chestnut cake is especially good. It's the only one I ate back in college." We didn't end up having dinner. Ethan noticed I didn't look well and took me home. As he opened the door, he hugged me from behind. "There's nothing going on between Chloe and me. I wouldn't have married you otherwise, Lily. Do you believe me?" I didn't answer his question. Instead, I asked, "Would you lie to me?" "No," he said, his voice firm. "I wouldn't lie to you." I softened, wanting desperately to believe him, wanting to just let it go. I wanted to spend my remaining days in peace with him, so I changed the subject. Ethan didn't go to the office that day. He stayed home, attending to my every need, fussing over me. When the lights went out, he pulled me into his arms, but I instinctively pushed him away. "Not tonight, Ethan." He paused, then his tone shifted, a hint of defensiveness creeping in. "Are you still angry?" "I'm not," I said, my voice weary. Yes, I like chestnut cake because of her," he blurted out. "But nothing is going on between us now. Do you really need to be so bothered by it?" It felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head, chilling me to the core. "Ethan, you didn't need to tell me that. I had already convinced myself it was just a coincidence." He didn't need to explain. Or Are you explaining because you feel guilty? I was still in Ethan's arms, and I could feel his entire body tense up instantly. After several minutes of heavy silence, I got out of bed. Ethan grabbed my hand, his voice a little panicked. Where are you going? I'm going to the guest room. Lily, let's just cool off for a bit, okay? I lay in the guest room, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. My mind kept replaying the scene of Ethan and Chloe sitting together, laughing. I didn't fall asleep until dawn was breaking. When I opened the door, I bumped into something solid. Startled, I took several steps back before hearing a voice from outside. It's me, Lily. I turned on the light and saw Ethan leaning against the wall, his long legs stretched casually across the guest room doorway. What I had tripped over was his foot. Why are you sitting here? I asked, my voice still thick with sleep. Ethan's voice was hoarse. I was afraid you'd leave. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. I'm fine, I said, trying to sound reassuring. Don't worry about it. Seeing me come out, Ethan stood up and followed me. What do you want to eat? I'll make you something. I shook my head, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. I'm going for a walk. You should get some sleep. You've got work later. Ethan didn't let go of my hand, and with a bit of force, he pulled me into his arms. He held me tightly. Lily, don't ignore me. I haven't done anything to betray you. We're just coworkers, that's all. Coworkers who sit together at your desk, laughing that happily? I couldn't help but retort. Ethan probably had never seen me like this before. He stared at me, dumbfounded, for a long time before rubbing his temples. If you don't like her, I'll fire her. I didn't want to come across as unreasonable, so I didn't say anything more. I thought Ethan was only saying that to appease me. But a few days later, Chloe stopped me outside my apartment building. Lily, Chloe said, her voice surprisingly soft, can we talk? I refused, my voice cold. There's nothing to talk about. You're scared, aren't you? Chloe smiled, a knowing, almost pitying smile. Because I'm working with Ethan, you're afraid you won't be able to keep him, so you had him fire me. I was a bit surprised and also confused. Did Ethan really fire Chloe because of me? That didn't seem like something he would do. I quickly composed myself. I don't interfere in company matters. If you have questions, you should ask him. Chloe gave me a meaningful smile. Well, you've given me permission, Lily. Let's see who's really most important to him. I found her tiresome, but at the same time, I couldn't stop myself from wanting to know the outcome. What would Ethan do? But I didn't expect Chloe to act so quickly. That evening, Ethan texted me saying he'd be home for dinner. But by 8 p.m., he messaged again, saying something urgent had come up at work and he couldn't make it. I asked him what time he'd be back, but he didn't reply. My instincts told me it wasn't just a last-minute work issue, so I called him. When I heard the automated message, "Well, the number you have dialed is not in service," I wasn't suspicious, just worried. This had happened before during his business dinners, and his colleagues would end up taking him home. The next day, I'd asked him why he didn't answer his phone or respond to messages. He had stared at his phone for a long time before telling me the battery had died. After that incident, he'd promised me that he would always respond and never ignore my calls. But now it was happening more and more often, and Ethan seemed to have forgotten his promise entirely. I was about to throw my phone aside in frustration when a WeChat message came through. It was a video from Chloe. I clicked on it, my heart pounding in my chest. The video showed Chloe with her arms wrapped around Ethan's neck, kissing him. Ethan stood there, his hands in his pockets, looking down at her with an expression of fondness? Indulgence? I couldn't quite read it. He wasn't resisting. He was letting her do as she pleased. I thought I would break down at that moment, scream, cry, shatter something, but I didn't. Instead, I watched the video over and over and over again, like some kind of self-inflicted torture, like I was trying to burn the image into my brain. Then, I calmly put my phone away, pulled out a suitcase, and started packing. This apartment, Ethan bought it. When we purchased it, he'd insisted on putting only my name on the deed. He'd also left all the decorating decisions to me. As I looked around at the cozy little home I had meticulously put together, I realized I only needed a few clothes. Taking anything else would just be a burden. It was better to leave it all behind. Before I left, I sprayed the perfume he had given me in every corner of the house. The scent, a light floral with a hint of musk, was his choice. I was gambling that he had at one point truly loved me. I brought my suitcase back to my parents' house. It was the middle of the night. I woke them up. They were startled, anxious, asking if I had a fight with Ethan. It was only then that I realized I shouldn't have come back. It would only worry them. But what else could I do? I missed them, desperately. When they found out I hadn't eaten, my mother, grumbling all the while, made me a bowl of noodle soup. The familiar, comforting taste stung my eyes. "Where's Ethan?" my mom asked, her voice laced with disapproval. "How could he let you come back alone in the middle of the night? What if something had happened?" I sighed. "Mom, I'm not a child anymore. I just missed you both and decided to come home." "Really?" "Really." My parents exchanged a glance, seemingly unconvinced, but they finally let it go. They insisted I stay for a few days before going back. I agreed. In the middle of the night, half asleep, I heard voices outside my bedroom door. Listening carefully, I realized it was Ethan's voice. I opened the door and walked out. My mom was still muttering, "Young couples always fight, but letting her come back alone in the middle of the night isn't right. Ethan, when we gave our daughter to you, it wasn't for you to treat her like this." Ethan's tone was respectful, almost contrite, as he repeatedly promised to take good care of me. When my mom saw me come out, she stopped talking. "It's late. You both should stay here for the night. Going back and forth now would take until morning." My mom returned to her room and I turned back toward mine. Ethan followed me in. "Lily." "It's too late," I said, my voice weary. "Let's talk tomorrow." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "So much has been happening lately, but once things calm down, I'll make it up to you. I promise." I turned to face him. "Ethan, did you really work overtime today?" Ethan's expression didn't change. What else could I have been doing? "Lily, what's going on? Is it the pressure of trying to have a baby? If you're feeling overwhelmed, we don't have to have kids." If it weren't for that video, I might have believed him. I wanted to say something when I noticed a hickey on his neck, and suddenly, I felt the blood rush in reverse through my veins. I never left such blatant marks on him, but now he had allowed another woman to leave them on his body. He hadn't even noticed the lipstick stain on his collar. Looking at him, still so determined in his lies, I suddenly felt like all my efforts, all my sacrifices had been in vain. "Let's divorce, Ethan," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "We should get a divorce." Ethan's face first showed disbelief, then darkened. "Lily, what are you talking about? Haven't I been good enough to you? Just because I've been too busy to spend time with you, you want a divorce?" I massaged my temples, which were throbbing with a dull ache. "Ethan, there's a lipstick stain on your collar, and I don't wear that shade." Ethan's expression shifted, a flicker of panic in his eyes, but after a quick glance at his collar, he said, "I've explained this to you before. It's just part of socializing at business dinners. You want a divorce? Fine. Let's get a divorce, and we'll go first thing in the morning." Exhausted, I replied, "All right, tomorrow morning at 9. I'll meet you at the Civil Affairs office." Ethan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He didn't come back that night. The next morning, I made an excuse to leave the house and went to the Civil Affairs office early. Ethan didn't show up. Instead, I got a call from Maya. "Lily, where the hell are you?" "What's going on?" I asked, confused. Maya's voice was so full of anger I thought she might explode. "Do you know who I just saw in the OB/GYN ward? Ethan and that little tramp, Chloe." I was stunned for a moment. What were they doing there? Maya took a deep breath, trying to calm down, but I could still hear the fury in her voice. "Chloe's pregnant." I snuck a look at her records. In the father section, it says Ethan Hayes. I returned to the apartment I shared with Ethan, but he wasn't back yet. Everything in the house was just as I had left it. Even the slippers by the entryway hadn't been touched. Ethan hadn't come back the night before. I went into the bedroom, took out Ethan's suitcase, and began packing his things. All of Ethan's clothes were ones I had bought for him. He didn't even know that I had carefully embroidered his initials, EH, into the inside collar of each shirt. small, hidden details known only to me. As I packed, I found a small, locked box tucked away in the back of Ethan's closet. Curiosity and a growing sense of dread got the better of me. I found a bobby pin and, after a few tries, managed to pick the lock. It was probably the biggest mistake I ever made. Inside the box was an old cell phone and a wedding photo, the kind with the bright red background. But the woman in the photo wasn't me. It was Ethan and Chloe. In the photo, they were both smiling, these incredibly sweet, genuine smiles. The date was written on the back, the day before Ethan and I had started dating. Everyone knew how shamelessly I had chased Ethan. All my friends knew. Even when they told me later that Ethan was still in contact with Chloe, I hadn't believed them. I'd seen Chloe holding the arm of an older, wealthy-looking man, getting into a luxury car, the kind Ethan could never afford even now. Just 2 days before Ethan agreed to be with me, I'd seen Chloe get out of that car at the school gate. To me, Ethan and Chloe were over. People whispered that Chloe had played Ethan, used him. But now, I realized that the one being played, the one being used, was me. I put the photo back and turned on the phone. The battery was fully charged. With trembling hands, I opened the messaging app. There was only one contact, Chloe. I scrolled through their chat history, torturing myself, discovering that on what seemed like ordinary days, days when Ethan had told me he was working late or at a business dinner, he had been reminiscing with Chloe about their past, their anniversaries. The photo gallery was full of pictures and videos of Chloe. The most recent one was a photo of her in his office, wearing her Innovate employee badge. So he never really loved me. It was all a lie, a cruel, elaborate lie. Ethan returned home in the evening, clearly not expecting to see me. He froze at the door, his expression shifting from surprise to something else. Guilt? Apprehension? I was about to speak when I heard Chloe's voice behind him. "Ethan, why aren't you going in?" Ethan's face paled. He seemed to want to say something, to explain, but he didn't know where to start. Without a word, I pushed his suitcase toward him. "I've packed your things. If anything's missing, you can grab it yourself." Ethan's face darkened. "What's this supposed to mean?" "We're getting a divorce." I handed him the divorce agreement, already filled out and signed by me. "I don't want anything but this apartment." Ethan didn't take it. "Are you serious?" Looking at his serious, almost offended expression, I suddenly laughed. A hollow, bitter laugh. "You've already brought her here, so why pretend anymore? Ethan, you're disgusting." "I only brought her because you're going to let her stay here and take care of her during the pregnancy, right?" I finished his sentence for him, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Ethan's face turned deathly pale, his fists clenched, but he had no words to refute what I'd said. Chloe stepped forward, boldly taking Ethan's arm. "Since we're being honest, let's lay it all out. Lily, I'm pregnant with Ethan's child. He wants a baby, but you haven't been able to give him one. You can't be selfish and deprive him of having a family. You're the one who should leave." My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my fingernails digging into my palms. The sharp pain kept me grounded, kept me from exploding. "This apartment is in my name. It's my house. What right do you have to ask me to leave?" "And why not? Ethan bought this house," Chloe retorted. "So you're saying I should split the proceeds of the house with him? Maybe even half of his company, too?" "That could be arranged," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Enough," Ethan interrupted, grabbing his suitcase and leaving without another word. "You two need to calm down," he muttered as he walked out. Chloe glared at me angrily, but in the end, she followed him. When the door slammed shut, I collapsed to the floor, exhausted. All the resentment, anger, and injustice I had felt came pouring out in tears, and I allowed myself to cry until I couldn't anymore. Until I was empty. The next day, I went to a lawyer and made my will. Chloe had taken the divorce papers with her. She'd make sure Ethan signed them. My lawyer would handle the rest. I stayed at my parents' house for 2 days, then packed my suitcase and went to a secluded, quiet town by the sea. I planned to spend the last days of my life in peace, away from all the drama and heartbreak, but I didn't expect things to turn out the way they did. Maya called me, frantic, asking why I had put the apartment up for sale. I didn't understand what she meant until she said she saw my apartment listed with a real estate agent. That's when I realized what had happened. Ethan and Chloe were trying to sell my apartment without my knowledge or consent. I packed my things and returned to the city immediately. Inside the apartment, Ethan and Chloe were showing the place to potential buyers. I overheard Chloe saying, "This home was decorated bit by me and my husband. If it weren't for the baby and the inconvenience of staying here, we wouldn't be selling it. The price can't go any lower. It's a school district house with room for appreciation. Plus, it's only been 5 years since the renovation, so it's a great deal." The buyers seemed convinced. They had agreed on a price and were about to sign the contract. But when they turned around, they saw me standing at the door. Ethan, stunned, turned pale and hurried toward me, pulling me aside. "Let's talk over there." I shook off his hand. "Did you ask for my permission before selling my house?" Chloe stepped out, her barely there baby bump surprisingly noticeable. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of defiance and smugness. "Lily, this is joint property. He has the right to handle it." I ignored Chloe and looked directly at the young couple, the potential buyers. "I see you're buying this house for your child's schooling, right? Well, the property deed is in my name. If I don't agree to transfer the title out, would you still buy it?" The couple quickly turned and walked away. Despite Chloe calling after them, they didn't look back, speeding up as if they were running from a monster. Chloe was livid, shouting at me, "Are you crazy, Lily? You don't even live here. Why not just let me sell it?" My whole body ached, and I barely had the strength to speak. I looked coldly at Ethan. "Take her and get out of my house. Don't dirty my space." Chloe tried to argue, but Ethan stopped her. "We need to talk about the house. It's our marital property, so half of it is mine. I can compensate you in cash." I smirked. "How much can you give me?" "1 million. I laughed, a cold, humorless laugh. This school district apartment was purchased early, and the price had been rising steadily. Just last month, it had hit 31,000 yuan per square meter. For a 130 square meter apartment, he was only offering me 1 million. When I didn't respond, Ethan frowned and said, "I'll also split our savings with you, but this house, Get out!" I pressed the 3 digits on my phone. 110. "You'd better leave right now. I've called the police." Chloe wanted to step forward and argue, but Ethan held her back, his face dark. "Is this really necessary? All you care about is money." My vision darkened as I grabbed a feather duster and waved it wildly. "Get out! Get out of my house! Get out!" Ethan shielded Chloe as he led her outside. He looked at me, disappointed. "Think about this carefully. I'll come back tomorrow." I slammed the door in his face, but the intense emotions, the anger and betrayal, left me dizzy. I groped my way to the sofa, dialing Maya's number. As soon as she picked up, I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Maya. Her eyes were swollen like walnuts, and when she saw me awake, she started crying again. I sighed, so, you know. Maya wasn't one to cry easily, but now she was sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. I quietly waited for her to finish. My thoughts drifted to a day early in our marriage when I had fainted outside the bathroom. That day, Ethan was working late. He later told me I must have been lying on the floor for over an hour before he found me and rushed me to the hospital at the time. At the time, I was only diagnosed with low blood sugar. When the doctor gave the results, Ethan had frowned, as if faced with an enormous problem. I had joked with him then, "Ethan, if I die before you, you'd better find someone to take care of you." Ethan's eyes had flashed with fear I had never seen before. He scolded me, "Don't talk nonsense, you're perfectly healthy. How could anything like that happen?" I think in that moment, Ethan must have loved me. His fear and anxiety weren't an act. Maya finally stopped crying and asked, "Does Ethan know?" "No, he doesn't. We're divorced." "What?" Maya's face turned green with rage. "That heartless bastard. How could he divorce you at a time like this? Does he even have a soul?" I was silent for a moment before speaking. "Chloe is pregnant. They listed the house for sale without my consent." Maya's fists clenched, her knuckles cracking. "I'm going to confront him." "Don't, Maya. It's pointless. Even if they aren't together now, they'll end up together after I'm gone. If I try to stop them, they'll only resent me. It's better to just let them have each other." But letting them be together didn't mean they'd live happily ever after, especially after I was gone. I admit I was being selfish, but I had given him a chance. Many chances. Maya was still fuming. Don't try to stop me. I want to see how that scumbag can abandon his sick wife for his mistress. Does he have any morals left? Maya, calm down. I know you mean well, but going there won't help. I have less than 3 months left. Even if I get the house, my parents won't live in it. Maya finally calmed down, but she was still frustrated. But you can't just let the mistress have it all. That's why I need your help. I want to secure my assets and transfer them to your name. Afterward, I'll need you to take care of my parents. Maya was about to refuse, but I explained. I don't want my parents to know about my illness. I'll tell them I'm traveling and I've already recorded a bunch of videos for you to send to them later. As for the divorce settlement, please send them a bit of money each month. My parents are getting old. They wouldn't be able to handle the truth, and I couldn't think of a better way to tell them. I can only let them find out gradually. Maya started crying again. Why is life so unfair? Why do you have to go through this while those two despicable people get to live freely? I guess this is just fate. After leaving the hospital, I called Ethan and asked to meet to finalize the division of assets. Ethan had an affair with Chloe during our marriage, so I demanded that he leave with nothing. What I didn't expect was that Ethan agreed without hesitation. The asset division was completed, and the cooling-off period for the divorce had also passed. After receiving the divorce certificate, Ethan and I walked to the entrance. Chloe was waiting at the door. Seeing the divorce certificate in Ethan's hand, she immediately hooked her arm around his and walked into the civil affairs office. Honey, let's get our marriage certificate now. Maya, who had come with me, mocked them. How convenient. Your future wedding anniversary will also be the same day as your husband's divorce from his ex-wife. Doesn't that make you cringe? Chloe froze, unsure whether to enter or leave. Maya was delighted. She linked arms with me, walking away in high spirits. After arranging everything, I put on some makeup to make myself look as healthy as ever, then returned home. My parents were happy to see me, smiling as they cooked a meal with all my favorite dishes. But the pain in my body had made everything tasteless. I told them I had decided to take a job out of town and might not return for a long time. They looked at me with pride in their eyes. You should have gone back to work ages ago. Spending your life revolving around one man isn't worth the years we invested in raising you. My eyes burned with tears, and I silently cursed myself for realizing it too late. After saying goodbye to my parents, I took a taxi to the airport. Maya was already there, waiting with open arms. Come on, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Let me walk with you to the end of this journey. 3 days after returning from my trip, Ethan stopped me at the entrance of my neighborhood. Where is she? The hatred in my eyes could have burned him alive on the spot. Your mistress? Haven't seen her? Ethan rubbed his forehead. Where's Lily? I haven't been able to reach her lately. Why are you trying to contact her, Ethan? Aren't you married now? What are you looking for Lily for? Do you want to repeat the past? I spoke harshly, and the veins on Ethan's forehead bulged. What surprised me was that he didn't lose his temper. Instead, he said, I have something important to discuss with her. Please ask her to contact me. I cursed under my breath and hailed a cab, giving the driver an address. Halfway there, I noticed Ethan's car following behind. The urge to retaliate surged within me. I wanted nothing more than to get out of the car, grab him by the collar, and demand to know how he had the nerve to follow me, but I held back until we arrived. I stood by the roadside waiting for Ethan to approach. He probably hadn't expected me to come to this place. When he saw me waiting for him, he had no choice but to drive over. I smiled sweetly. Ethan, you want to see Lily? I'll take you to her. She's just up there. You'll see her soon. Ethan glanced at the cemetery and didn't believe me for a second. Is this some kind of prank, Maya? We've known each other for years. Can't you help me convince her to see me? Ha, I've brought you here to see her, and you don't believe me. Is that my fault? Ethan frowned. Maya, there's a limit to jokes. The anger I had been suppressing erupted. A joke? Who's joking with you? I'm telling you, Lily is dead. She died on the anniversary of your wedding. I brought her ashes back. She's right up there. You can choose not to believe me, but you can't deny the truth. Ethan looked at me with disbelief. I had no desire to continue talking to him and started walking up the hill. In her final days, I was the only one by Lily's side. She passed peacefully in my arms, free from pain forever. While I mourned the loss of my closest friend, I also felt a sense of relief for her. She no longer had to suffer. No more pain would haunt her. As I stood by Lily's grave, I was yanked aside. Ethan stared at the photo on the tombstone, muttering, "It's impossible," over and over again. Seeing him like this gave me a sense of grim satisfaction. See, Ethan, she didn't even want to see you before she died. The last time she saw you was at the Civil Affairs office. What were you doing then? You were marrying Chloe in front of her, right after signing the divorce papers with her. Ethan, why do you think she would want to see you? What right do you have to come here? It's impossible. Lily wouldn't. Yeah, how could she die? How could her own husband not even notice she had cancer? Ethan, did you know that while she was in unbearable pain, you two were sending her photos of your happy life together? She was still looking at your wedding certificate with that woman before she died. She said you never smiled at her like that. Ethan, why don't you go to hell? You're the one who should be there. I didn't. I never sent her those photos. I laughed bitterly. Those photos could only come from the two of you. If it wasn't you, then who? I watched as the color drained from his face, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a small sense of justice. But this was nothing compared to the pain Lily endured. Ethan left. It took him over 10 minutes to stumble from Lily's grave to his car, a distance of just a few dozen meters. I wiped away the spots on Lily's tombstone that Ethan had touched. As I did, the tears started to flow uncontrollably. Lily, we're going home now. I've cleaned the places Ethan touched. He won't taint your next life. Lily, you've endured all the suffering in this life. In the next, you'll meet a man whose eyes are filled only with you. Don't worry, your parents are my parents now. I'll take good care of them. When Maya told me Lily was dead, my first reaction was to think she was joking. But then Maya showed me Lily's death certificate, and I had no choice but to believe it. I don't even remember how I got back to what used to be my home with Lily. After the divorce, Lily had listed the apartment for sale. I found out through the real estate agent, and in a moment of madness, secretly bought it back, not even daring to let her know that the buyer was me. Maybe it was out of guilt. Or maybe it was because of the hidden feelings for Lily that even I hadn't fully realized. The house was no longer the carefully arranged home she had created. All traces of her had been erased when she decided to sell it. I wandered back to what was now my home. Chloe was lying on the couch playing games. When she heard the door open, she didn't even look up. Why are you back so early today? I stood in the entryway looking at the disheveled, unkempt woman in front of me. When she didn't hear a response, she finally looked up at me. What are you standing there for? Go make dinner. What if you starve me and the baby? As she spoke, she rubbed her swollen belly. Suddenly, Lily came to my mind. Lily always spoke to me in a gentle tone, her bright eyes shining. She never ordered me around, never threatened me. The only time she did was that day when she, almost breaking down, told me to get out. Thinking of that scene made my throat go dry. Lily, I didn't get to finish before Chloe sat up, her voice sharp. You went to see Lily? What are you seeing her for? Are you still not over her? Ethan, don't forget, you were the one who came after me. She was the one who wanted the divorce. So what now? What's your deal? I looked at Chloe and felt like she was a stranger. We had only been married 3 months, and Chloe's temper was getting worse by the day. Ever since I had found some of Lily's old things, her emotions had been out of control. At first, I thought it was just mood swings from the pregnancy, so I tried to accommodate her. But now, I didn't understand her at all. You're being too sensitive. I'll stay at the office for a few days. You need to calm down. I turned to go pack my things. Chloe followed me into the bedroom, demanding, Why are you staying at the office? You're not going to the office. You're going to see Lily, aren't you? You think I don't know you've been looking for her lately? I knew Lily wouldn't let go so easily. She's definitely still trying to get something from you. Enough! The image of Lily's smiling face on that cold tombstone flashed in my mind, and a wave of pain washed over me. Lily, she's already dead. What could she possibly want from you? While she was suffering, you were still sending her pictures of us. How could you be so cruel? What? She's dead? Chloe was momentarily stunned. Then she laughed. Good. Why should I care that she's dead? Ethan, she has nothing to do with you anymore. Now that she's dead, she's even less of a concern. I didn't understand how the once gentle Chloe could say such heartless and vile things. I stared at her like she was a monster. But Chloe was lost in her own emotions. How did she die? Was it painful? Did she... Smack. I couldn't hold back and I slapped her. On the way back, I had done my research. From the day Chloe started working at the company, she had been sending Lily pictures. And several times Lily had tried calling me, but Chloe had hung up. Lily was such a kind and beautiful person. How could Chloe hurt her like that? Chloe fell silent for a moment before exploding again. Are you crazy? Why did you hit me? Her death has nothing to do with me. You two were already divorced. I'm your legal wife now. Crash. The ceramic jar I had just packed in my suitcase shattered on the floor, and its contents spilled out. It was Chloe's diagnosis, a pregnancy test positive. My hands trembled as I picked it up and saw the date of the diagnosis, the day she started working at the company. I clenched my fists, the veins on the back of my hands bulging. That day, I hadn't come home at all. I had spent the night with Chloe at a hotel, and that's when the baby was conceived. Lily had called me several times that night, but I didn't pick up. After that, I couldn't look her in the eye without feeling guilty, so I started coming home later and later. With Chloe always by my side at work, the guilt I had for Lily gradually faded away. I often wondered if Lily had made a scene back then. Would I have come to my senses and tried to make things work with her? But there were no what-ifs anymore. Ignoring Chloe's protests, I went to a hotel and stayed there for half a month. When Chloe found me, I just gave her a cold look and kept drinking. Judging by the shock in her eyes, I could guess how I looked. I hadn't shaved in 2 weeks, and I'd been living in a drunken stupor. How good could I have looked? Chloe carefully stepped around the scattered bottles on the floor and came to stand in front of me, her voice angry. Who are you trying to impress with this, Ethan? Lily is dead. Can't you get a grip? How can you let yourself fall apart over someone who's no longer here? What about the company? Breathing became painful. Every time I thought about those days I spent with Chloe while Lily was alone in a cold, empty house, I felt like ripping my heart out to see if it had turned black. She didn't scream or cry when we divorced, but Chloe still sent her photos to hurt her. How devastated must she have been? I found out that in the end, when the pain became unbearable, Lily had taken sleeping pills to end her life. She was always so afraid of pain. She used to cry in my arms whenever she got the smallest cut. How much must she have suffered in her final days? And what was I doing? I had let Chloe throw out all of Lily's belongings and erase all traces of her from our home. She hadn't left me anything to remember her by. When I remembered that she had left some things with me, I stumbled as I tried to get up. Before I could steady myself, I fell again, completely pathetic. I reached out my hand toward Chloe, but all I saw in her face was undisguised disgust. Then, I heard Chloe say, "The company is getting worse every day. You have nothing left, Ethan. I was blind to think you were worth something." Her words hit me like a brick. What? What did you say? Chloe didn't respond. Instead, she turned toward the door and waved. I followed her gaze and saw her ex-husband, David, standing there. My scalp tingled with a sudden rush of dread. Chloe clung to his arm. "Ethan, I don't want you anymore. Divorce me. I'll take 2/3 of your assets, and from now on, we'll have nothing to do with each other." I couldn't understand. You two? Her ex-husband sneered. Chloe, you said he was a promising investment. But all I see is a useless coward. Let's take his assets and go home to have a son. I looked at Chloe's belly and a ridiculous thought crossed my mind. Her ex-husband answered my unspoken question. Yes, the baby is mine. You and Chloe never had anything between you. Did you really think I'd let you touch my woman? I ran into some financial issues with my business and didn't have enough capital to recover. Chloe came up with the plan, and our son arrived at just the right time. We figured we might as well go all the way. So, Ethan, just hand over your company. Otherwise, I'll make sure everyone knows how you abandoned your seriously ill wife. My mind went blank. By the time I came to my senses, Chloe was already rummaging through my briefcase. Watching them, I suddenly started laughing. Chloe looked at me warily. What are you laughing at? Chloe, I really misjudged you. But since we're married now, don't think about getting divorced. You destroyed my family, so you won't have a peaceful life either. If we're all rotten, let's go to hell together. Chloe's expression turned. Chloe's expression turned frantic. What are you planning? I won't divorce you. If I have to suffer, we'll suffer together. You think that just because you won't divorce me, I can't file for one? As long as I claim that our relationship is broken beyond repair, I'll just have to wait through to the cooling off period, and I'll be free. I grinned. Our relationship is so good. How could it possibly be broken beyond repair? Chloe, we have a child now. Even if the child is born and you admit to having an affair, I still won't divorce you. You'll be tied to me and the child forever. Chloe had never seen this side of me before. She retreated into her ex-husband's arms, her face turning pale with fear. You're crazy. You've completely lost it. Yes, I've gone mad, but Chloe, you're my wife. I've never hurt you and I still love you. No judge will grant us a divorce. Her ex-husband yelled, The child in her belly is mine. We both want to remarry. How can the court not approve? I calmly explained, Remember how you faked evidence of domestic violence so you could get a quick divorce? If I submit those documents to the court, they'll side with me to protect my wife and child. Isn't that right, Chloe? Chloe was so terrified that her legs gave out. She trembled, unable to speak. I stood up, walked over to her, and smiled gently. Let's go home, dear. The smell of alcohol here isn't good for the baby. In the days that followed, Chloe and her ex-husband repeatedly tried to get me to divorce her. They even took it to court. Chloe stood before the judge and confessed to her affair, asking for a divorce. But each time, I looked at her lovingly and gently reassured her, Don't be like that, darling. I love you so much. How could I ever divorce you? I treat you so well, I'm sure you'll come around. After all, life is long. Chloe and her ex-husband had no evidence to prove I had wronged her. On top of that, the judge could see how well I appeared to treat her. We never managed to get divorced. 6 months later, when Chloe was lying on her deathbed after giving birth, barely clinging to life, I held the newborn child in my arms and went to Lily's grave. Lily, can you see? This child doesn't look anything like me. If I had realized earlier that nothing ever happened between Chloe and me, would I have had a chance? A chance to walk with you through the end? Lily, I miss you. I really, really miss you. After Chloe and I finish tormenting each other for the rest of our lives, I'll come down to make amends with you. Lily, wait for me.